Hello everyone, it's Lamani here, and the Void Gauntlet is finally here, and we've already busted it. I thought it was going to take some time getting this deep dive together, but I just want you to watch the damage that I can put out with the survivability I have in combination with the life staff. But even just the Void Gauntlet alone does so much damage, so much healing, and gives you a ton of survivability if played right. Honestly, armor class isn't even mattering that much. I'm hitting for over 1300 on light attacks with all kinds of dots ticking on somebody who's wearing heavy armor. I've been sitting on the PTR for a couple hours, just dueling, killing things, doing everything I can and testing all the abilities that I can to give you all the best combination as far as the PTR goes to put out the highest damage, have the most sustain, and succeed in the open world. Something that's even crazy with this PTR is it is so hard to optimize and get the proper perks for the things you would like to try, and yet we are still flattening everybody. This is by far the highest damage, most OP Void Gauntlet setup I have found, and I want to give it to all of you. There's obviously still a couple things that are bugged here and there with the Void Gauntlet. Some things have changed, like life staff healing, and we'll get into that. But this is super important so that you can all get a head start for when the Void Gauntlet goes onto the live servers. I will say, I think this could take the #1 spot as the strongest open world hybrid damage weapon that we have seen yet. As is tradition, I'm going to break down this weapon in one of my deep dive formats, but I want you all to take it with a grain of salt. The PTR is subject to change constantly. So this build is going to work now, but it may not work in a week from now. I think if it even stays as it is and just has some damage numbers tweaked slightly, it will still be absolutely insane. So let's lock it in, focus up, and let's get this Void Gauntlet going. All right, everyone. So here we are out in the open world with our fancy new Void Gauntlet. Let's dive into the build breakdown for this. First, let's start with the life staff. Now, the life staff is receiving a little bit of an overhaul as far as balancing. If you actually look at every single healing ability, you'll know that the percentages for everything changed. It's about a 20% nerf to every single heal, including Enchanted Justice. Everything just has less healing now. Now, is it super significant? Not really. I think only taking 4% off Sacred Ground, 20% off Light's Embrace, 4% off Beacon, even the heals over time are addressed in Protector's Blessing on Orb of Protection. Everything is nerfed by about 20%. This doesn't make a huge difference in healing. I've tested it. I've ran medium, heavy, and light loadouts. Do I think this healing nerf is a make or break meta changer? By all means, no. It's just a little bit of a reduction in what we could do, and what we could do was absolutely outrageous to the point where you could 1v7 people and not die. So I think it's justified, and nothing in this build is going to change. I'll give you a little breakdown of our healing meta here. In general, what I take so that I can function out in the world and act as a healer and flex and do whatever I want to do, I go into Absolved, then I'd go into Blissful Touch and Mending Touch still, just because when you're healing teammates, Mending Touch is key when you want to remove debuffs as a flexed healer and not necessarily for solo play. So if you're looking to solo, or maybe you just want some more healing output, Enchanted Justice can get you a lot of healing. This is something I would maybe run for a 1v1 duel, I would run out in the world, but I want to have this build ready so that I don't have to ever respec it and I can do whatever I want to do with it and still heal effectively. So consider either dropping Mending Touch and taking Enchanted Justice, or just doing what we would standard do. Sacred Ground is super important, just getting this 50% increased healing and then having a 16% weapon damage heal every second with all these modifiers. It's insane. We'll take cooldown reduction here, and then we'll take Sacred Protection to get 5% more healing, and then adds a 30% floor to our Light's Embrace. That 30% floor becomes a 60% floor, so it increases Light's Embrace healing by 140% weapon damage baseline by taking Spirits United, and Sacred Protection because they both apply a buff, meaning Light's Embrace will always be better than Divine Embrace in this situation. We'll then just take Intensify to give ourselves more healing. It's just a no-brainer. Bend Light does the same thing. Use Bend Light to snapshot all of your heals. Ideally, we would get our 3 Intensifies, Bend Light, put down Sacred Ground for even more effectiveness, and then Beacon our target to get the highest Beacon possible. That is our absolute highest, best snapshot scenario. Where else do we go with these points? Well, because I'm focused on specifically using the Void Gauntlet, I don't go into Protector's Touch, and I take Protector's Strength for more healing in general when I have a buff. I then take all the points into Beacon, and I take Speed of Light because we don't have a lot of mobility with the Void Gauntlet, so this gives us a little burst of haste every time we're healed by our Beacon. This will stay on you because you are a life staff user. You can toe dip, and you'll keep the 15-second buff. Any time that you get healed by it, it'll give you 3 seconds of haste, even if you're not in the circle. Beacon is also just a nice little heal, 16% weapon damage each second for 15 seconds because we get the longer duration. and then it's a pretty big size, so if you want to use it in other content and heal other people, it's fantastic. We all know the breakdown of the life staff. I do change some things. I still take this ultimate, but I don't take Protector's Touch, and instead I take the haste. This is something I'll consider doing in the future. I would say with a strict healer build though, I would still take Protector's Touch. I'd probably drop Protector's Strength and then maybe take haste for more PvP stuff. I think there's a lot of value in Speed of Light as far as PvP goes, not necessarily PvE. I'd flex that point into Protector's Touch and PvE. This is the Void Gauntlet life staff side of the build. Something we're used to, we just take one different buff here. All right, now let's move into the Void Gauntlet and really break this down in general. So how does the Void Gauntlet function baseline? Light attacks are going to do 100% void damage, heavy attacks 125%, but passively you're going to get 20% heal for that damage done on heavy attacks. Those light and heavy attacks both cost mana, and a really neat, unique function that they've added to the Void Gauntlet is that you cannot block with it. If you block, you do something called Harvest Essence, and that'll convert your health into mana over time, similar to a life tap on a Warlock in World of Warcraft. That rate at which you gain mana back is going to scale with the weapon damage itself. Now let's get into it. This is by far the strongest 1v1 DPS setup. You put out a ton of single target, you can put out a ton of AoE, and it's just become my new favorite weapon. I don't know whether or not it's because of people are thinking it's bad and not knowing how to build it yet, we're all still learning, or just because it looks cool when you use the sword. I don't know what it is, but I'm really loving it right now. Now there's really two ways you can go at it. This build is focused on melee DPS and damage dealing. The other side is more of a support healer who plays at range. You can still put out some damage, but you have a lot more healing utility on the decay side of the tree. Annihilation, hence the name, is where the damage comes from. In general, the Void Gauntlet has 6 abilities. First is Void Blade. It just converts your basic attack into a sword. It functions just like the sword and shield. Similar animations, similar ranges, very, very, very similar. Next, we have Petrifying Scream. This is going to do a scream that roots the enemy up to 5 meters in front of you. It also staggers them, so you can use it to interrupt heals, which I think is just busted. And they just can't move. They're sitting there rooted for 2 seconds. You can catch up to them. And because you have haste on your beacon, you will easily close gaps on anybody within 5 meters. It's also a great source of damage, and we'll talk about how we roll that into more and more and more damage as the fight continues. The next ability is Oblivion. This is going to be similar to Sacred Ground in a sense. It's a ground AoE that deals 30% weapon damage every second to people in it. It grants a power to self and friendlies. You increase your damage while you're in it, and it lasts 6 seconds. We can put modifiers on it to give them weaken and give us stamina back, but this is really easily countered. Basically, it's just like Sacred Ground. If you can get them out of it, it's easier to fight them. You can also really easily dodge it. If you see Oblivion go down, just run away. That's all. Then they lose a whole cooldown, they don't get damage back, and they can't hit you so that they can keep their sword or other abilities rolling. On the decay side, we have Orb of Decay, which is a little buggy right now, but the damage purpose of it functions well, and you do get the heal. The animation just doesn't look right. That's all. I also think right now it's really hard to use Detonating Orb, but in general, I don't think I would use it. So it works as you throw the orb out, and then when you hit the ability input again, it'll blow up the orb. Now your orb has 2 phases. It has a damage phase on the out, so as it goes at the enemy, it's going to do damage. Once it hits max range, it'll come back and transform into a healing orb. When it returns, it'll heal you for 20% of weapon damage per second for 5 seconds, so it's just another hot. You do get that heal over time when you're fighting, you just can't really see the animation. So on top of all of our focus stuff and all of our life staff stuff, this is another huge chunky heal that keeps us alive. Baleful Tether, this is going to fire a projectile on an enemy and it'll weaken them while empowering you by 4% per second, stacking up to 20%. It's a great little damage modifier, but if you miss it, you're kind of out of luck. It's a 25-second cooldown, 10-second duration, and if they run 15 meters away, which isn't that hard when you're using weapon abilities to get away from people, it breaks. I think it's a good ability, but by using any kind of movement, any kind of utility to get away from a target, it's very easily broken. So I don't really dip into this. There's some modifiers that are okay, like the mana regen is really big, especially for the Void Gauntlet. You're chugging through mana pots if you don't have the right mastery points in, and then you can also get a nice heal if the target dies. I could see this being really good for just chaining mobs together while you're leveling, but endgame, PvP, PvE, I wouldn't suggest using it. The last one, Essence Rupture. Now this is one I really considered using, but I think there's a larger window for error with this as opposed to the other ones. And the reason I don't take it is because it has a 5-second longer cooldown, and I'll tell you in a little bit why we want lower cooldown. It's strong. You'll heal yourself for 20% of the damage that you do to the target if they're marked by it. You do have to hit them with it. So if you miss it, it's just a waste, right? In a lot of these abilities that I've selected, they're very, very hard to miss with. You'll also get an even bigger heal for your entire group, and you'll heal for 80% of the weapon damage done when Essence Rupture ends to everybody. I could see this being a really great thing to take as an off healer or even as a main healer when you're just trying to pump out a little bit of damage. You take this, go pound down a boss, and then give your whole group a nice chunky heal. Now, let's actually go into our build and why we take the things that we do. One, I wanted to take Void Blade because I just think it is the coolest thing in the world. Void Blade, basic attack, quick slash is just like the sword, heavy attack is just like the sword, that's a thrust. Both of those attacks will apply a dot on the target. Disintegrate, on successful hit, will deal 5% weapon damage per second and reduce damage absorption by 5% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 3 times, lasting 15 seconds. So essentially, every time you hit them with your sword, you not only get a dot that will increase in damage, you also are giving them a 15% rend by the time it is done, meaning we can pen armor, and this will really take down a big, heavy armor player very, very easily. What other points will we go into? Well, you need to max out Void Blade. This is going to be your biggest source of damage. If you take Fortified Blade, gain Fortify and start, increasing damage absorption by 20% for 5 seconds. Big thing here is we get so much defensiveness because this Fortify is huge when comboed with something like Fortifying Sacred Ground, which I got to roll on one of my PTR pieces, meaning I can start a fight with so much Fortify that they can't even do anything to me for like the first 5 seconds, 6 seconds of the fight. This next point that we take, plus 10% critical damage on Void Blade attacks. Why not? Just take the more crit damage. You do crit a lot. We have a lot of crit synergy on the Annihilation side. And then the last piece, successful thrust attack, so your heavy attack will heal self for 5% weapon damage per disintegrate stack on target, meaning you'll get a 15% heal, and it scales with focus. So because we still put points in focus, this is a ton of healing that can get you out of a pinch. It'll also close a lot of ground when you heavy attack, but it's like, why wouldn't you just do this? It's very easy to hit once you've rooted somebody with Petrifying Scream. Now, Petrifying Scream, unleash a Void Infused Scream dealing 100% weapon damage, that's a big chunk there, staggering and inflicting the root to enemies 5 meters in front of you, disabling them for 2 seconds. This is really big. You have so much chase down potential, you can set up heavy attacks, you can just get your initial combo off on them. It's great to have, and it'll come off cooldown very quickly if we have something like Refreshing Strikes on our sword, and with all of the other synergy on this side of the mastery tree. Bone Chilling Voice, root duration increased by 1 second on targets below 50% health. Everybody likes to run away when they start getting low health. Why not just root them for 3 seconds now so that you can really make sure you can secure the kill? And then we love Fortify. Fortifying Echoes, increasing damage absorption by 10% for 10 seconds per hit. So when you're in a 1v1, this is a 10% Fortify essentially constantly. You could get this to stack to 30% if the fight lasts long enough, but with the amount of damage you have, a lot of fights will not last that long. That gets us to about 7 points on this side of the tree, so let's dig into the masteries. First one, Forsaken Pack. 10% damage while below 50% mana. We burn through mana very fast when we're using these abilities. If you play in something like Sacred Ground, you will have increased mana regen, but do not be afraid to hit a mana potion, but do not hit it until you're absolutely out of mana, because we can get a damage burst. It's a great one to take just for passive damage that you don't have to really be aware of all the time. Keen Confidence, 10% crit while above 50% health. Well, because we have a life staff, and we heal so much with the Void Gauntlet, we are always above 50% health, meaning we will crit so much. Next, Refreshing Precision, plus 10% cooldown reduction on all abilities on critical hit. Wow, look at that synergy. We get 10% critical chance while above 50% health. That'll then proc more abilities, meaning we can scream more, stacking more Fortify, rooting them, keeping them pinned so that we can just keep hammering them down. The next one, 10% critical chance while all abilities are on cooldown. Well, we just roll our face on the keyboard and hit all of our abilities to make sure they're down, and then they'll come back up, and then we can keep using them, and then they'll go back down and get more crit chance, and then when we crit, they'll come back up. There's just some really wonky synergy that happens here, and why not do animation cancels with these abilities, do a heavy attack into Orb, or a light attack into Scream, and it just cancels the end of the animation and pumps out a quick burst of damage really, really fast. Now, this is the absolute crux of the build. Empowering proximity. Gain empower when casting abilities within 5 meters of an enemy, increasing damage by 10% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. Well, folks, we have 3 abilities, if you don't notice. So what do? When I'm in a 1v1 and I'm starting up a fight, I do not pop my sword until I'm within 5 meters of the enemy. This gives me a 10% power. I'll start hitting them a little bit, wait until it's at 2 to 1 second, hit my next ability, or if they run, I'll just hit them with Scream, and that'll put me up to 20% more damage. And then once I'm at 20% damage, I'll let it ride a little bit, and then I'll throw out Orb, right? So I then have 30% for 5 seconds. It ramps up, and we extend the duration. If you really just want to burst them down, hit them with every single ability, and then just pray for crits. And because we're doing 30% more, those crits will hit really hard. Like I can heavy attack for almost 3k with this setup. I can light attack for 15 to 1800 on a crit. It does so much damage. And because there's this damage synergizing with crit, and the crits get out more abilities, it's very easy to keep empowering proximity rolling. This is the huge damage output. Next point, Leeching Agony. On critical hit, gain health equal to 15% of the damage done. Well, luckily we're a damage fiend and we're a crit fiend. It's more healing on top. You can beacon yourself, Sacred Ground yourself. You'll get 50% more healing from Sacred Ground. You'll get 20% more from your 150 focus bubble. And this will just keep you healing non-stop, and you will be an absolute nuisance, and they'll just have to alt F4 their game so that they don't have to worry about it anymore. Only are you putting out a ton of damage, you can also use this like the Great Axe to just leech like no tomorrow. So on top of Leeching Agony on crit, and then all the damage, all the crit modifiers, and then using Leeching Blade, imagine if you crit on a heavy attack with 3 stacks of Disintegrate. You just heal it back. You don't even need your life staff at that point. It's nuts. And then we'll take this as the last point, 5% cooldown reduction on all abilities when successfully hitting enemies afflicted by 3 or more debuff stacks. It is very easy to get 3 stacks rolling of Disintegrate, so why not? Now the beauty of it is that when we take the ultimate, we also stack Void Essence, meaning we have 2 ways to get this done. I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but this could potentially stack because we have 2 separate debuffs. I'll need to do some deeper testing on that. That's why we have the PTR, but I just wanted to get this out to you first. Now, the real big piece to this Annihilation side is the ultimate Void Caller. On successful ability hit, so that counts for our sword. That's why it's so easy to stack. It's not just on our abilities. Every sword hit, because it's an ability, counts. At 6 stacks, you'll get this giant AoE. It'll consume all the stacks, and you'll get an aura. That aura heals you and your friendlies for weapon damage. So again, more healing between Leeching Blade, between Leeching Agony, and Void Caller, and it'll do that weapon damage. The healing itself then also scales with focus, and it lasts 5 seconds and has a 20-second cooldown. By the time this gets done in your burst window, you will just absolutely clobber them. So what'll happen then is you're hitting them for all this damage. They'll have a 3-stack, 15% weapon damage dot on them, and then they'll also be taking 30% weapon damage for 5 seconds from this. All of those dots also stack on whatever damage modifiers you have. So if you had something like Keenly Empowered on your Void Gauntlet to get 15% damage when Void Caller procs, it's 15% harder. You put up so much pressure and healing between just passive damage on your dots. You get a 3-stack rolling for 15 seconds, and then you have this 5-second, and even if you get stunned, even if you get slowed, even if they try to range you, you just keep them on the tip of it, and you have pressure from the sword dot, and you have pressure from the Void Caller dot. It's a ton of damage on swing. It's a ton of passive damage and healing as well. Fantastic. So much fun to duel people with. Now, a lot of you may be wondering, why do I not go into Oblivion? Why do I not go into Essence Rupture? I think Oblivion is just too easy to counter. And the real big reason is so that I can get some usefulness out of the Decay side and get some more mana cost reduction. Sure, that doesn't necessarily synergize with Forsaken Pact, but you go through mana so fast that I don't want to go and I want to be able to roll through a couple rotations of abilities, because this CC that this brings and the CC that Orb brings are nuts. So Orb, you'll shoot it through, it'll do a big chunk of damage. It's very hard to miss it, okay? You can just use it when you're in melee range. It'll do 100% weapon damage and put the Disintegrate on them, so it's easier to build Disintegrate. You can keep it refreshed from a range. Let's say they run away from you, throw an orb at them, it'll reset that duration. That's another 15% for 15 seconds. Then we'll go plus 5% mana per enemy hit by the orb. Just a little bit of mana stuff on the top. There's not really any damage utility to go into on this side yet. All we'd have left is Efficient Harvest, and I don't really use this because I'm just trying to keep my sword up, and when we're critting and with all the cooldown reduction, our sword is pretty much never down as long as you hit them. Worst case scenario, you might have to hit them with 1 or 2 light attacks. But we'll take that mana back, it's really nice to have. Now the real big reason is this. The orb slows enemies already affected by any debuff, reducing their movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. This, since we don't have mobility, Orb and Scream will allow us to lock them down and close gaps and just eat them alive in addition to the haste buff from Beacon. Then the last mastery we'll put in is just mana costs are reduced by 25% while above 50% mana. Just makes it easier, and then once we get to that 50% mana point, we'll get the 10% damage. And then we can hit a mana potion, or we can actually use Essence Harvest. Or we can actually use Harvest Essence to get topped off, and then we'll just heal ourselves back up. So this, if you're coming from the bookmark, is the most insane Void Gauntlet melee damage setup on PvP targets, PvE for single target and AoE. You have so much sustain, so much healing. I am so excited for this to hit live. Okay, so what's my attribute spread to really be effective in all kinds of settings? I am 162 int right now, and that's just because I pushed a couple more points in because I had them left over. 150 focus and 108 con. I only have 8.6k health, almost 8.7k. Yet I just don't die. So what's important in intelligence? The 150 bubble just gives us a flat 15% increased elemental damage, meaning we'll do all types of void damage that are increased by 15%. Next, 10% critical hit damage. We have so much crit synergy, we get more crit, we heal on crit. Having that 10% bonus will give us more healing, it'll give us more damage. And then the last one is the most important one, because damage with heavy and light magic attacks, including our sword, are going to be increased by 10%. The Void Gauntlet will main scale off of intelligence, so we'll have the highest coefficient when going into intelligence to get the most damage. I just think it's important to hit the 150 bubble at least, and then we'll get a lot of value going into focus because we'll still get some scaling, but then we'll get the 150 bubble to get 20% increased healing output. So getting the 150 intelligence is super important for all that damage, but it's also important to get the 150 focus. 1, because we scale pretty hard with it, but 2, this 150 bubble that gives us 20% healing output applies to everything on the Void Gauntlet that does healing. It applies to the beacon you can give yourself, the sacred ground you can give yourself, all of the healing modifiers, and you just can't die. It's nuts. You could combo it too with Essence Rupture just to get even more healing if you want to go that route. I would probably drop Orb then, but I like the CC that Orb brings. And then the big point here is getting 100 con, increasing max health by 10% of our physical armor. Why not just get more health, have enough con to stay alive? This is the attribute breakdown I would suggest. 150 int, 150 focus, 100 constitution, and you will just be an absolute monster. All right, so let's talk about gearing. PTR is a little bit hard because I can't really force the pieces that I want with the perks that I want. But on the plus side, what does that mean? Well, we're already stomping people with not optimal setups and doing so much damage. Imagine when I get a Void Gauntlet with Keenly Empowered and Enchanted Strikes on it. Like, can you even imagine what's going to happen? I have no words. So what are we looking for in our armor? I can only begin to assume that the Void Gauntlet perks are going to be amazing. I uncovered 2 when looking at the crafting in Arcana, and I found Diminishing Orb, which reduces the duration of a target's buffs by 44%, so we can negate a lot of healing and a lot of fortify on our Orb of Decay usage. The other one that I found is called Voracious Blade, which is going to be when you're below 50% health, your Void Blade will heal yourself on 25% of the damage done. With the strength of those, I cannot even begin to fathom what else will come from armor perks. It will be absolutely necessary to get the modifiers for Orb, Scream, and Blade. It's only going to make it better, so shoot for whatever perks you can get that are going to modify your Void Gauntlet abilities. Now, the one thing I will say you absolutely need that we say in every build now is making sure you have a piece that is Fortifying Sacred Ground. This will scale with the actual gear score level. On live, I have a 580 chest piece and mine is 13%. This is 8.3% for 5 seconds, but why not just give ourselves another Fortify on top of everything else so that we just negate all damage? And now it's going to proc every time that we get a Sacred Ground heal. So in general, I'm playing in a medium loadout. There have been some changes. we get 10% bonus damage and 15% bonus healing. So by being in medium, we get another 5% bonus to healing that we didn't have before. And again, this still isn't scaling right. It's not a flat 15%. We did get a slight nerf on the life staff, so this makes it a little bit easier. Light, you get a 30% bonus to healing. I still don't think it's worth to wear light. You will just get annihilated, and the defensiveness to healing output ratio just does not equate there. So I would highly suggest not running light. Run medium. This is a very tanky, very heal, damage focused setup that you're a wrecking ball. So medium, gem wise, I have diamonds in just because I was dueling, so I was seeing both types of damage. In general, I'd probably put straight onyxes in just so we can get a full 2.5% physical damage absorption per piece, meaning we would get 12.5% physical damage reduction by putting one into every single piece. You're going to need to find pieces that help you get to the 150, 150, 100 split. Mine is just full con right now. And then I allotted my points to make sure that I could do it the right way. For jewelry, the neck is going to need 3 things: health, divine, and fortified. Just like the stratagem piece that we have on live. Fortify will extend the duration of all the fortifies we put down. Divine will increase the healing you receive. And then health will just give you more max health. I would be about 9.5k probably-ish with all the modifiers if I had health on my neck. The ring, we need sacred. Sacred's going to be big, and then if you can get void damage on a ring, which I have yet to see one on live, but a void damage sacred ring will be your absolute best friend. As far as earring goes, we want regenerating. Regenerating, cooldown reduction, a 25% reduction to potion cooldown, anything like that, but I think regenerating here is going to be your best friend. For the life staff, I wish I had mine, but we're going to want either fortifying sacred ground on here so that we don't have to run it on armor. I would highly suggest that if you can get one. Otherwise, you absolutely need to have blessed. I'm doing all this healing right now on this with no blessed, and my beacon just keeps me topped off. I have no concerns, no worries. In general, you'll put a diamond into it. Blessed will put you over the top with significant healing from beacon and sacred ground. Now the void gauntlet. This is a pure int one. This is just the one I picked up. I should fish for more, but I'm not going to sit here and grind for perks because I want to go actually play the game. Perk wise, what are we going to be looking for? I think the absolute best in slot perks will be Keelian Powered and Enchanted Strikes, meaning you'll get more light and heavy attack damage baseline, and then every time you crit, which with all that crit synergy, baby, we'll have a 15% damage on top of that, meaning we get more healing, more damage, more everything. You could also opt to get Refreshing Strikes just to get your cooldowns rolling and just run over people, constantly keep them CC'd. The gem though, this is where I've changed things. I have tested this. I've thrown an amber gem in. I'd be curious to see what would happen with a tier 2 amber gem, but I don't think it's worth it. So what I would do for the gem is either take an emerald and get 20% damage against targets with less than 30% health. I think there's more opportunity for executing there and will really push the damage over the top. Or I would say take an opal, where 15% damage while your stamina is not full. What does this mean? So we're so used to dashing while healing. Why not just do it to get more damage? It's very easy to keep up if you just dash a little bit and maintain just a couple of stamina off the top of the bar. Very easy to do. We'll be dashing around a lot, and it's 3 dashes because we're in medium and not 2 rolls to burn the whole stamina bar like it would be in light. So it's easier to maintain this and manage it to get that full damage increase throughout the entirety of the fight. It's not just at 30%. It can be done the entire time. It's a lot more movement, and it would kind of remind me of like a WoW Demon Hunter, but that 15% damage increase will be huge on top of everything else. That's all I would say for gearing. Always use honing stones just to get a little bit more out of it, and then use whatever food you want, more attribute food, whatever. Honing stones are the key here though, and the tooltip is now fixed. All right, let's now do some gameplay breakdowns so you all understand how to best use the Void Gauntlet in a PvE versus PvP scenario. What's the main bread and butter of the rotation? Get your heals active, get close to the enemy, pull out your Void Blades that you get Fortify and you get Empower. Then you can either get a couple hits off and then start to use other abilities so that you get a longer Empower window. Or if it's AoE like this, simply just burst your abilities, get the higher damage right away, and do a ton of AoE. You'll see in these AoE situations that not only are your Scream and your Orb doing a lot of the AoE, it's actually the dot that you're putting on them, and then when you have your ultimate proc, you get so much damage from that in an AoE situation as well. Throughout all these clips, I want you to keep constant tabs on my buff bar and my health. Watch how much damage comes out, watch how much damage I take, and watch how much damage I heal and negate. It is insane. This is especially funny when you're in any duel. But the general rotation stays the same in PvP versus PvE. You want to pull out your sword when you're close to proc the mastery that gives you a 10% power. You then either ride that in power until it's 1 to 2 seconds left, use your ability, so then you have 20%, ride that until you have 1 to 2 seconds left, and then use your final ability to get the 30% stack. It is more likely then that you'll have another cooldown about to come off so that you can keep the 30 stack rolling. Alternatively, just roll your face on the buttons, get the 30% increase, crit, and pray that you get the cooldowns back and just keep doing it over and over and over again. In a PvE setting, this build shines as a soloing monster that certainly will be a fast leveler because of the uptime that you'll have on healing and the amount of damage that you'll be able to do to enemies, especially when they're in a group. This is a hybrid build to the likes we have never seen in New World. You have damage and healing and mitigation built in very, very easily, but I would say that this weapon has a higher skill cap to it with cooldown management, mana management, and understanding what abilities to use when. For PvP, I was leaving people on the PTR awe-inspired. They just kept asking me what I was doing, what was going on, and saying it was doing so much damage to them. So how do we take on a PvP scenario to flatten the competition? Honestly, for the fairness of PvP, I only used Beacon, and I rarely use Sacred Ground unless I was fighting against a healer. You'll want to dash up to the target so we can get our gem usage, but then we also want the Empower from the blade. If they begin to run away, automatically root them. Once you're in melee range, hit them a couple times, follow it up with an orb. We want our dots to be ticking as soon as possible. Honestly, nobody is going to expect what you put out in this build between damage and healing alone. So on top of that, throw some CC in the mix, and oh boy, you're not going to be stopped. It doesn't matter what armor class they're in, medium, heavy, or light, you will just destroy them. Like it's just flawless victory after flawless victory after flawless victory. And you can even use it to burn through another healer's healing while they're in Sacred Ground with a beacon up because the damage from your dots and your hits are so insane. In this clip, I just had somebody with full focus heal stalling me because they thought that was the move apparently, but we kept the pressure up, they kept having to heal, and then we used our abilities like Orb to our advantage and Scream to interrupt them to give us windows where they couldn't run away and to interrupt their healing that they were doing. You will always apply a high amount of pressure on anybody in any role. While it's obviously a bit early and it's in the PTR, I still think the Void Gauntlet has a very, very promising future in New World and will certainly be tweaked. With proper play, I think that it will begin to shine as the 1v1 king and the ultimate duel build. Void Gauntlet just brings so much to the table in terms of shutting down the opponent, keeping yourself alive, and putting out the most damage possible. So I hope everything I've told you will help you in winning all of your duels in the future. I know a lot of you are going to be experimenting with the Void Gauntlet, so I just wanted to help give you a build that you can start testing to see how much damage you can do and to begin really enjoying the Void Gauntlet and getting excited for its live release. If you have any new information or anything I may have missed, anything you think I may be wrong about, please feel free to comment. I look forward to talking to all of you. We have some big things here. Our Discord is now live as of this video. The link is in the description to join, so please come on. Get in here and let's start talking. I'll also continue to keep testing things in the PTR and putting out content on it as I see fit, so expect that within the next week as well. Other than that, healing wise, I have a lot of expedition content. We've done Lazarus, we've done Garden of Genesis. There's a lot to uncover there and a lot to discuss for the next week. I'll also have a Farming Friday out on Friday. This time I won't miss it. Like always, I appreciate all the support you're all giving me. Thank you for everything. If you could please do all that weird YouTube stuff where you like, comment, you subscribe, and you ring that bell thing, I would appreciate it. If you also want to directly support me, feel free to reach out on my Patreon. It'll also be linked in the description. And as tradition, I'm just going to read all of my patrons off like normal. So thank you GDB, Blue Beagle, Florian, The Kamikaze, Bob, Ralph, Ronan, Generic Guy Mummy, Tarvi, Joseph, Nicasio, Chad, Thonar, Nathaniel, Ajuro, Ethan, Anarino, Shmeezy, Gil, Shane, Thuggius, Adrian, and Jacob. Did it in reverse order this time. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being you.